Okay. I guess I'm gonna say I'm live. Um, for some odd reason, something's not agreeing. Anyway, the trouble with men. I'm reading two books in tandem right now. One is The Archetype of Initiation by Robert Moore, and the other is Spiritual Bypassing by Robert Augustus Masters. And it's rather kind of interesting. I've been sort of wanting to change my focus. And here's why. Remember a couple of months ago, women would prefer to run into a bear or meet a bear in the woods rather than a man. Damned embarrassing. And then we get the revel, and this is a little bit after the Pellico woman in, I don't remember her first name, or the asshole husband's name, but it was after that, and then they would, and then after women said they would rather meet a bear, and that made its way around the internet. What do we discover? And that is rape academies. I think now women would prefer to meet two bears, both of which were hungry, and a couple little kids, cubbies in tow. Honestly. And last night I went and saw a local play. It was done by a firefighter, a man I know, an acquaintance, and it was done rather well. I liked the way that they themed it, and so that the structure of the overall thing was pretty good. But it occurred to me, as a former firefighter myself, how we get into some interesting situations that never resolve. What do I mean by that? Well, in the book here by Moore, he talks about sacred space, profane space. It'll get into rituals of initiation. He mentions some various authors along these lines, some of which have moved what used to be done in indigenous circles into modern times. I don't know to which extent those have been successful. But men are in trouble. And so I'm looking at this in terms of the Raise Your Resilience healing program. So if you need to send me an email, you have questions, that's where you get a hold of me. Men really need to heal. Because the idea here, and he talks about in the book, Archetype of Initiation, is that we enter into a different space-time by something, well, let's say for me, when I was 20, my mom died. Oh, baby, that kicks you into a sacred space, as you can call it. This is what he's calling it. Back then, I wouldn't have known that. It was a shock. It changes your perspective on life. It changes who you are if we can respond to these times adequately. The whole grieving process and all of that. The same could be said if your house burns down, or both your parents die, or you go to war and you watch people get killed, or you end up losing an arm or a leg, or traumatic brain injury, a life-threatening illness in your parents. There might be a few things, and I would almost have to pull in if you want to take the ACE test assessments, 10 questions, some of those things that kick you into this liminal space, as it were. And as I was watching last night in this play, one of there's a musical theme that tied it together, and then there was his continuing experience as a firefighter and some of the things he learned about that. And so he was using certain calls of his experience to unify this thread. And early on, it was dealing with dead people. That's what we did. And one of the issues is, when you go to a call, and that's your first one, you have been kicked into sacred space. I'll just use that phraseology. Extraordinary is an adequate term. It's quite, and there's a difference. If you go to a call, let's say, and that person is dead, they died, they're 80, 90 years old, and no signs of trauma or no anything. Maybe they had a heart attack, they fell over dead, but that's death. Kind of what happens to people when we get old. And then there's the death of a teenager who took his own life with his dad's handgun. That's a different kind of death. I assure you. By experience, I assure you that those two deaths are not equivalent. So having these types of experiences, what do we do with them? I don't have a pager here because that's what I went to reach for. So let's pretend. Yep, pager goes off again. And you go to another one. In fact, I could use my own story here. And that is that on the one call I had on December 25th of 2011, it was the call where I had a complete nervous breakdown and kind of not even a resolution of that, but I took a breath and at least I stopped crying. I was on the scene and we get a page. It was my rig that needed to go to another call. And that other call was a person who was found dead in their home. And thankfully, somebody else showed up because I walked in and I just took one look at this dead body and said, "Not me. I'm done." Turned to the guy and said, "This is your call now. I'm out of here." I didn't care if that was protocol one damn bit. I was done with dead that particular day because the previous call was also a dead. Now, if you go to raiseyourresilience.com, you will note that there is a blog post on there called My Perfect Storm, which talks more about this. So I won't go into those details because I had those two different deaths on that one day. And that in the 15, so 15, 16, 17, roughly 18 years, something like that, 1999 to 2015. You know how we dealt with that kind of stuff in the fire district? Your next call. That only goes so far. So there is no recognition of this being kicked into this other kind of space-time, which Moore calls sacred space, in which if we had the right resources, we could resolve some of the stuff that we're dealing with, but we don't. And in fact, I would say that even at that next call, what we're doing is even bragging about, I just had two dead, I'm a tough guy. And we know all too well that this is kind of a norm among some men. which is interesting because I know that men love to accessorize. They accessorize their trucks and their AR-15s like they would put trans people to shame. And who are they patting on the butt side about that? Yeah. The other guys with AR-15s and big trucks. Yep, men are in trouble. It's because we lack these things as boys. And I think about, and I don't know if it was called the Emerald Rainforest. I kind of think it was, but some white kid gets adopted into a tribal society, and he just grows up as a boy, and then one day the hormone train arrives, and that's when the chief says, time to move on. And I know in some tribal societies, they had structures where once that initiation, they had a ritual and an initiation, and that was how they got moved into being a man. Women had their own, and I've read about some of those. Men in modern culture have jack shit. Zero, zip, nothing. And we now have rape academies online. That's perfectly stupid, perfectly absurd. And we can talk about all the world leaders as evidence and proof, and that's correct. How do we correct this? Well, we correct this by beginning again. So if I get a male, I'm even thinking about changing my own program to include a little bit more of some ritual aspect of making this time of dealing with the things that because in my program is a little different than most. When I'm talking about healing trauma, I'm not talking to you. I'm watching you tremor. But it's still a sacred space because all of that stuff is inside of me. All of that male stuff that's somewhere, never woke up unless it was kind of in an ACE test way. Whereas for me, my parents never ever talked to me, not my mom and not my dad, never talked to me about anything sexual. And so when I was, I think 8, because this is how the math worked out for me. I was 8 and I was I was walking with my good friend, Mark Fosshager, and his dad, and we were down by the railroad tracks and up there to this day still. I mean, it seemed like it was, way up there. Well, that's probably because I wasn't real big, but up there in the trestle, fuck. Somebody spray painted it in black letters. And, I'm learning how to read. So I look up, I go, fuck, because they were big letters. Big letters meant you said it loud. Mark's dad. Oh, he turned so fast. It makes me laugh. I didn't laugh at the time, nor did he, but in retrospect, I can imagine, from behind all of a sudden you hear this little kid say, fuck. And he turned around and said, what did you say? And I pointed at the trestle and said, fuck. That's what it says right there. So he said, that's not a word you should use. And I said, why? What does it mean? He says, go home and ask your dad. So this is how I'm remembering this. So I did. Went home and asked Dad, Dad, what's fuck mean? Ask me when you're 13. And I remember at that time thinking, that's 5 years away. Now, did I remember when I was 13? No. You know why? I already knew. And you know who told me? Wasn't my dad, wasn't my mom. I mean, I was already in the drug scene. So all of that kind of stuff was kind of common knowledge in, junior high and high school. And so I didn't get any of that information. I think that's too true. In fact, while I was looking for places to hide certain things that I had, I found the hiding places of things that my dad had relative to women's bodies. So that's kind of how I learned about women and how men should view women and what women were desirable and which ones were not, so forth and so on. Anyway, no rituals, no initiation, no care, no, this is the stuff that matters, son. This is what happens if you're not careful when the hormone train shows up. So for my kids, what I thought was, oh man, my ex and I, we were all over those kids for years about cleaning their bedroom. Did that work? Not one damn bit. We tried everything. Didn't matter until they got the first girlfriend. Oh, baby, you come home and you walk by the door and you go, what in the fuck is this? It's just like a museum piece. And then later you say, okay, over a couple of weeks, you started to hear that so-and-so's, you keep mentioning this girl's name. She's my girlfriend, kind of. So that explains the clean bedroom. You want her in it. Ooh, okay, so it's time to go buy the first box of condoms, sit down and talk about the birds and the bees. And they already knew all that shit. Mostly because anytime they asked us something, we did answer them because we knew that as kids, are they going to be, go pursuing this? Well, I'm sorry, my youngest son, no, they'd ask a question, something they heard, so they'd ask us because we were safe-ish, and so we'd answer their questions. And I remember we got into the word fuck one day, and we said it so many times it was meaningless. By then we were laughing hysterically, all four of us. So there is this answering of the children's questions. And, I was still at a loss because I didn't have any of that. I had just made kind of a pledge that I wasn't going to be like my parents. And in the event, this is where men have gone wrong. This is stuff that needs to be corrected. The porn industry in this country alone is hundreds of millions, if not just slightly over $1 billion. Wow. That's completely wrong. And our attitudes about sexuality are unbelievably archaic and harmful. I'll say that. They're harmful. So we have to work on our particular understandings of these things. So I remember when I lived near St. Olaf College in Northfield, I was up in the lunch area getting hot chocolate after a snowing. Anyway, I was up there with my boys, and big textbook right up there on the counter belonged obviously to the student behind the counter, Sex and Sexuality. Oh, wow, cool. So I said, can I scope through here? Just kind of, scan the thing quickly? Sure. So I'm scanning through it. And what I was looking for was, what is this saying about sexuality? A book this thick, and it had this little tiny bit about sexuality. The rest of it was about sexual positions and other stuff like that. It was just like, that's bass-ackwards. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean? And I started to think about engaging the student, and I thought, nah, that probably won't be appropriate. So I let it go. Now, in all of that stuff, that's where this comes in. Because in all of these things, there is the possibility of really glossing over the issues that we have in our sexuality because we've been wounded there. And that stuff needs to be healed. That's kind of why I'm changing the focus of my program to direct it more towards men, because honestly, more men than me in the community that I'm in as a somatic therapist, 95% of the clientele are women. More than that are the people who are going into it as a profession. You know what I don't see? I don't see men as sexuality teachers or sex therapists. There might be some, but I hear from a lot of women who are certified in those fields, and damned if I could find where I can get trained, because men need this kind of thing. I want to abolish rape academies, not by pulling cords and all that kind of shit, because it'll pop up somewhere else. You know what I want? Male hearts, male minds, so I can turn them into men who understand consent and how sexy that is. Men who understand that no means no. Men who care about themselves. And honestly, healing your trauma will help create all of that. And religion, and I've been there, will overlook almost all of that. Oh, I assure you, been there, done that. So the trouble with men, they're wounded. The solution, heal your trauma. Simple as that. So if you're looking at this or you're seeing this and you're a man and you just want to talk about it, let me know. No pressure. Yeah, I'd love you to be a client, but no pressure. Let's talk about it so you understand how we approach this, because it's rather unique. You don't have to tell me about your sexual stuff at all, anytime ever. You might not even remember it. But let's have a conversation. That's where it all starts. And if you're not a man, this works for women too, but I'm aiming at men because that's a bigger need right now. Cool. Healing. If you're a woman and you want to talk about it, that's cool. You know where to find me. That's my email address. If you know a man who might resonate a little bit with this, pass this along. Let them see this, hear this, and have them get a hold of me. I know it's been kind of longish here, but I wanted to address some of the features about why I think what I do about this and address that. Anyway, may the rest of your weekend be glorious, kind of like it is outside right now. It's beautiful outside. Man, the windows are open. The heat and temperatures and everything are just beautiful. It's probably in the 60s. Nope, don't know. But maybe 70s, and there's no bugs. No, it's beautiful outside. Tomorrow's supposed to rain. We are in May-uary, as I call it here. So in any event, may your tomorrow, Memorial Day, may it be a good day for you. May you remember and honor the sacrifices of those who took on the Nazis of the world and died, whether they died physically or, like my parents, died in every other way to fight that scourge. May your heart be open. Goodbye.